Welcome back to the Faith and Reason podcast on Paving the Way Home. Today we're delighted to be joined by Father Columba Mary Toman in Dundalk. Father, how are you?
I'm doing great, Kevin, and yourself?
I'm great. Can't complain now. So the churches are reopened now and things like that. So things are, I suppose you were always busy, but it's a different busy now for you.
It is. We were very blessed. Our church building never closed.
Okay.
During the whole time of the pandemic, with people coming in small numbers, but coming to pray in the stillness. It was beautiful, actually. As the time went on, you became very aware of the grace that was just being poured upon those who are coming into the church, and just as we ourselves as friars going in and out and praying, noticing a lot of people praying the Stations of the Cross.
Really?
During that time, it was quite amazing, and as they were praying, we were kind of praying with them, because you just didn't know what was in their hearts and their minds, and what was it they were walking with Christ with, Okay, there was part of Lent was still happening at the time, but after Lent as well, still to this day, with people who come in and gently just praying the Stations. And also spend time in front of the Blessed Sacrament, the Lord himself, in the tabernacle, of course. So during that time, it was beautiful, and people were so appreciative. The fact that the doors were open, you had the social spacing and hand sanitizing and everything else that had to be there. But we were actually encouraged by people and by others to actually make that facility available, in terms of just having the doors open. And the amount of people who said this afterwards, going home from work and going home from the hospitals and all the rest of it, and they drove by and the door was open, the light was on, and though they couldn't come in themselves, they actually had that sense of hope, a real hope. It was very moving, actually. And then, of course, on the 29th, when we restarted the, inverted commas, public masses, all mass, no matter where it is public, even behind the closed doors is still public in that sense, but to have the people of God present, it's just amazing, really. Wow. Because here in the Ferrari, we had 5 masses every day. Anyway, 5? Well, there's 5 of us here, you see.
Oh, yes, yes,
so
yes.
And so it was a joy, absolute joy, because people were ringing us and emailing and through the various media and such. Please pray for us, and the joy of being able to do that. But also, I know at the very start we reminded people, if you hear the bell ringing in the church, because we didn't stop the bells, if you hear the bell ringing, remind yourself there's mass being said.
Wow.
Because it was interesting initially. Lots of people were saying, "Oh, there's no mass," and you're going, "No, there is mass.
Yeah.
There's mass throughout the whole of the country and throughout the whole of the world."
Yeah.
And don't forget that. When you hear the bell ringing, okay, the angel's bell has a particular reason, but if you hear the bell in the morning still ringing for mass, lift your heart, because mass has been said. Now, of course, there was the heartache of not being present to it, and the joy of sharing with people the spiritual communion and all the rest of it. But nothing compared to the joy of last Monday or the Monday before, on the 29th, when they opened the doors. So they had it all set out with the proper spacing and all the rest of it. But the joy on people's face, and actually, it was quite moving because we're meeting, of course, old friends. Our people of God here around Dundalk and further afield coming in, and the tears in their eyes, joy. I remember one lady just came in and said, "Father, I'm going to receive Jesus. I'm going to take him in my hands. I'm going to receive him." He says, "Yes, I pray the spiritual communions, and I understand the grace and the power of the communion." He says, "But to actually receive Jesus." And it was very moving, actually, to see just the joy bubbling in her and all those who come into the church, Yeah. And so we're not taking it for granted, We don't know if another wave will come through or whatever. And so day after day,
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I think there was probably a danger for us. Well, even personally, I know that I was always just take it all for granted. And I suppose it's like you never miss something until it's gone, And talking to a friend then as well another day, he was saying about, like, with spiritual communion, I think he said that when he was focusing on the words of the spiritual communion, it was only then that it really struck him that every time he received physically, prior to that he never fully embraced the spiritual part of it, whenever he was fully receiving. Whereas he said that, that's when it was taken away and he had the spiritual communion, that actually kind of awakened him to that. And then he was really looking forward to the 29th then.
Exactly. It was so powerful, but also it was a reminder that spiritual communions can be made many times a day. It doesn't have to be just linked to the watching of Mass.
Yeah.
In my own life, during seminary and studies for priesthood, because you were taught this, make many spiritual communions, offer them up for the sick and the people that you are called to work with and all the rest of it. And that's one of the great things that, yes, now the churches are back open in terms of the Mass and all the rest of it, that even at home now, people can still make the spiritual communions. Driving in the car, spiritual communions. I for a walk with your family, making spiritual communions. And if nothing else, there's a wonderful opportunity for us now to engage more fully with the presence of God. The presence of God in the here and the now, in this very moment. As you know, I'm from the north, and therefore we love the word now. Now, but God in this present now. Allowing ourselves to really engage with that, and if nothing else, if that happens, that's a great joy, and a real challenge as well, to realize that that at the end of the day, we do spend quite a lot of our time in prayer. If we just allow ourselves to lift our hearts and our minds to that knowledge, God is present to me in this moment, in this present moment, in this now. And we don't have to pray the spiritual communion for that, but that very act of spiritual communion links us a little bit closer to that reality of the Holy Communion,
Yeah.
I know you've other questions tonight, Kevin.
but that's interesting, because I actually read something recently where it was kind of it was talking about like the marital act, and it was just talking about where two people love each other so much that it's like, I want to be where you are. I want to be, the two people want to be, so kind of joined. And I suppose that maybe, with prayer, often it's, Jesus, come and be with me, and things like that. But I suppose it's like the spiritual communion is like, come in, just, it's like, let's be totally united here.
Yes, so, exactly. And that whole thing of the theology of the body, I know Chris West tells beautiful stories. I think it's about his father-in-law, weeping at Mass the next day after marrying his new bride, and just cutting the story short, basically because those words that this is my body given up for you, and he had experienced this.
Wow.
With his new wife, that those words actually rang true for him, and then he received Holy Communion. And for those words to be said to him, then the body of Christ, in the Mass, this is my body given up for you. And I think even these days, more and more, with society, and especially in the West, that phrase, "This is my body given up for you," is so counter to "it's my body and I do with it as I wish." And there's this juxtaposition between those two positions, and one is based in sacrificing love, and one is drawn into a selfishness. It's mine.
Yes.
Mine, and I'll do to it as I wish to do with it. Whereas the Christian understanding and the Christ moment is, no, I lay it down. It's just so you can be set free. And so, typical of Catholic theology, it's like a spider's web with bells on it. If you ring one, if you pull one end, it rings somewhere else.
Absolutely, but it's all just so connected.
Absolutely. So if you ask, how about reopening the churches? You're going to hear about the theology of the body. You're going to hear about the dignity. You're going to hear about the sacraments. You're going to hear about the personhood. You're going to hear about salvation, all these different things ringing together, you know. And so when Catholics meet to talk theology, you know, there's never enough time, and there's just so much, you know, present to it, you know. But
and I think that's kind of what we're even doing here with Paving the Way Home. It's kind of like, you know, that, you know, when we go to Mass, we can hear you guys to preach to us for, you know, 10, 15, 20 minutes.
you've been to the Dominicans, then? Okay.
I have, yeah. So that's and but it's like, you know, like that it's kind of, it's more to give a platform just to kind of to open up and explore things more, because there's a great hunger out there, and particularly among all ages, but particularly I think among the youth there's a real hunger there at the moment, and there's been some great things on during the lockdown.
It's been fantastic, Kevin. Even the not to embarrass you, but the conference there in Cork that you were involved with, just incredible.
Yeah.
You have such speakers to present to us, and it was because of the pandemic that those people were actually free to be present to us in a way. They didn't have to leave home. They didn't have to jump on a plane or come to us. Now, I think it's always better when we meet personally, of course. But if nothing else, during the pandemic, I know myself, I was in Philadelphia with 70,000 other people. I didn't leave the dock to get there, but there were 70,000 people at the Theology of the Body conference. You know,
wow.
You know, quite amazing. 30,000 at another conference. You know, just online, people all over the world gathering together. And I know for myself, I spent a lot of time on missions. Or did until recently, and all the parish missions are suspended and everything else. And you're wondering, goodness, how are we going to, you know, as order of preachers, you know, reach out, you know, in this time? Now, as you imagine, we've lots of ideas, but what surprised us was how many opportunities actually came our way. You know, once we learned Zoom, Teams or whatever, you know, that after that first dreaded moment of going, what's going on here? I spent the last 3 months, week after week, leading online courses or prayer groups that they wanted a spiritual input into, standing behind a camera phone, broadcasting the masses and holy hours and everything else. I even found myself in America at a university there working with medical students, you know, and for the last 4 weeks, as a spin-off from the conference we mentioned earlier, I had the joy on a Monday night and a Wednesday night having a group who were looking at St. John's Gospel, and then on the Wednesday night looking at the whole moral theology and the moral life itself. Just introductory courses. Again, people from all over the country, you know, and it was quite amazing that in a time where everything was shutting down and closing down and becoming insular, we actually found ourselves more out and about than we normally would be, because I remember one night somebody from Belfast, from Carrickduff, from Tralee, from Cork, from Dublin, from Kilkenny, you know, all in the same group, all looking at the same thing. And you're going, this is amazing. And in that group, with people from Lithuania, people from Spain, people from Italy, you know, all within those groups, you know. So all of a sudden, the Catholics, the Catholic universal nature of the church was made visible. While in the world, it was a sense of being closed behind doors and not being able to go out, you know. And so, yes, that was very tough in terms of the reality of the close down and lockdown for people. But it's amazing how the Spirit can just take these opportunities and actually push it forward. And I thank God that we have the technology to be able to do so. Now, it doesn't replace human contact, you know. It doesn't replace actually the cup of tea and wherever it happens to be. But in a time when that wasn't possible, you know, these things still went on. And as you're right, the hunger. Oh my goodness! I finished both courses last week, and every member, when's the next one? When's the next one? Let us know. And they were going, okay, that's up to us now to actually find opportunities to put these courses out, you know. And again, very blessed because we're at a time where there are actually lots of online courses.
Yeah.
You know, it's there to be, it's there to be grabbed. You know.
Yeah.
You know, and actually for us to take a wee step back initially and go, okay, how do we develop a catechetical course line as such, you know, starting in one place and moving forward rather than just a bitty, oh, that's interesting, which is okay at the beginning, but how do we then bring it together so we have a deepening of a sense of the faith as well.
I know. I suppose it's kind of like the spider's web that you've mentioned, that if we can just take someone from that outside little thing, just keep bringing them slowly to the center that way, rather than someone just pulling at different strands. Yeah.
Very much so, and for us Dominicans, you know, it's very much part of our study as well. You know, and preparing for these classes, you know, yes, lots of them have DVD introductions to it and everything else. But of course, knowing us, we want to bring it a little bit further, little nuggets as we go through. But it's been great for us as well to have that focus. You know, you've been around us for a while. You know, that sense of to contemplate and share the fruits of the contemplation. You know, there was our opportunity to contemplate in a particular way. You know. And to preach for the salvation of souls in a particular way at a particular time. You know. And we're still in it, you know. The pandemic's not over yet, you know. We still have social spacing, we still will have these concerns, but the opportunities are
that's true. And like, as long as this social distancing is going on, it's kind of a thing of, I suppose, you know, we won't have different courses on in person, so there will be a lot more courses coming online. Now, you mentioned there about you being a Dominican, and we can see the habit, and we can see St. Dominic up there on your left shoulder. So,
he's there whispering into my ear.
Yes. So, but you weren't always a Dominican. So, so what's your background then, Father?
Well, I'm actually a diocesan originally. I was a priest of the diocese of Down and Connor. And I was there happily and very happily for 16 years.
16?
16 years, yeah. I had considered the Dominicans before that, but I was asked would I mind staying on a bit longer. And having already taken a promise of obedience, I was very obedient, and I stayed for a bit longer. But I was chaplain to Queen's University in Belfast for 12 and a half years, actually. And before that, I was curate in East Belfast for 4 years. And while I was there, I was a hospital chaplain and a Marie Curie chaplain, heavily involved with our diocesan pilgrimage to Lourdes. I think at one stage there was a count of 17 jobs happening for various reasons, and I loved it, to be honest with you. I loved that whole life. But during that time, the Lord just kept calling. The Holy Mother, Mary, kept making it very obvious to me there was a deeper sense of call, you know, to enter into religious life as is responding to a deeper call into contemplation, you know. And I prayed about it a lot. I had great spiritual directors around me and all this helping. The bishops were very, very open to me discerning it. Kind of disappointed that it was going forward, but in terms of open to the fact that the Spirit was speaking in such a way. I knew the Dominicans over the years, but I joke that I came to them through the osmosis of the St. Martin de Porres magazine.
Right.
My mother, God rest her, would put the magazine underneath my pillow. You know, and I said that every night the St. Martin would be whispering into the ear. As a child, I used to love St. Martin de Porres magazine and reading St. Martin Answers, you know, section, and reading how Martin was still working. And in my room at home, I still have the statue that's been there for 40 years at this stage, you know, in terms of he's a bit battered and a bit bruised looking, and then I refer to him as my broken-necked Martin. He's been dropped so many times, but he's still there. But that so Martin de Porres, if as a family at home, he was very much our saint, you know.
Okay.
And just his story and just his miraculous side, but his humility was quite powerful. And so it wasn't a surprise to me that when the Lord was calling me to a deeper living out of priesthood, it would be to the Dominicans. You know, you might know the vocational journey. You're not just called to religious life. You're called to a particular charism. You know.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't feel particularly called to any other order. And I looked at others, you know, in comparison over the years, and maybe monastic life and all the rest of it. But the Lord kept calling me back to the Dominicans. That's that sense of contemplation, study, prayer, community, but also the order of preachers.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, that real. Now I was doing that already.
Yeah.
As chaplain to the university, I was called upon. I've done parish missions before that, and days recollections and all the rest of it, and just working with young people, young adults, with a self, you know, a mission heart, you know.
Yeah.
And so when eventually I was able to say yes, and that's only 4 years ago now. In terms of I'm a baby Dominican. I'm 21 years a priest, you know, but still simply professed in the order, and God willing, moving forward to solemn at some stage over the next year, God willing.
Great.
You know, but so it was a response to a profound sense of call.
Right.
And so it was a yes within a yes.
Yeah, you know, like Mother Teresa's call within a call here. Yeah.
Exactly.
I see.
But I very much get that, because I was a very happy diocesan, you know, and all that went with that. But I'm even happier, you know, profoundly happier as a Dominican, because I said yes to the first call, and saying yes to the follow-up.
Yeah.
You know, has brought you to the place where I truly believe that God has been calling me to be, and my experience thus far, given missions and all the things that we do, it's been fantastic, to be honest with you. You know, highly recommend.
And well, it's out for me. So it's, I have a wife and a child who.
There's always the lay Dominicans, Kevin. You know?
I see. And you mentioned there about thesis that you wrote, and that was on
dignity.
Dignity.
On the concept of dignity and how it applied to the end of life.
Okay.
I was very blessed as chaplain to Queen's. I was working with the medics.
Okay.
And kind of a guest. I won't use the word lecturer. It was a guest speaker on various topics: beginning of life, end of life, how to treat the whole person, for example, and then not just a sore arm or bad heart, but actually the whole of the person. And I was invited by the School of Nursing, members of the School of Nursing, to actually think about doing a PhD. That's what it was, with them, looking at the whole end of life care. The whole Liverpool care pathway was still in place at that time. I've been very blessed over the years. I was involved with bioethics committees here in Ireland, but also a committee that linked England, Scotland, Wales, the north of Ireland, and the south together to work with the various Episcopal conferences. You know, so so a kind of a bioethical background. My own degree pathway is through science. You know, I did the biological sciences initially, and then a master's in scholastic philosophy, then the theologies and licensed theology and all the rest of it. So when this opportunity came up, would I mind doing a bit of study for them at a more philosophical level, because they had lots of practical PhDs going on? Would I kind of look into the question, what is dignity? You know, should we still use it? Is it a term that's still useful? And then how, if it is, then how do we apply it to healthcare at one level, but the end of life care specifically? And part of that was to see how the term was used and understood in the English-speaking world itself. So that was a bit of work a few years ago. Fascinating, as you can imagine, that sort of work. You you think you're going in one direction,
Yeah.
and you think you're going to cover all these bases, and then all of a sudden a little light bulb goes on. You go, this way.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I've a few questions that I do want to ask about the end of life side of things of dignity, but I'm going to go back to the start of kind of just, if you can give a small little idea of kind of what do we mean when we use the word dignity.
That's a huge question.
Yeah, I know. It was the basis of a thesis. So, yeah.
Believe it or not, at one level, we have to try and understand the term on so many different levels that to give one single definition is actually quite difficult, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a guy called Professor Solmese, who is a medical doctor, but is also a former Franciscan friar, and he writes beautifully and powerfully about dignity in healthcare and elsewhere. And he broke it up into three parts really, but the two main parts of dignity itself, he described as being intrinsic dignity and a thing called attributed dignity. And so if I was going to give you a definition on those two, I would bring those two things together in terms of, and if you don't mind, I believe it or not, I have it in front of me here. He has a definition for intrinsic, which I think is worth just listening to. It says, intrinsic dignity is that worth, stature, or value that human beings have simply because they are human, not by virtue of any set of biological, psychological, social, economic, or political conditions, nor of the views of other people, nor of any particular set of talents, skills, or power. And so at the very core of that, dignity is a worth, it's a stature and a value, you know.
Yeah.
And what he says that every human being has what they call intrinsic dignity, that dignity that you have simply because you are human. And that dignity can't be lost.
And that's something that, okay, as Catholics, we know that that's something that's given to us from God.
Yes.
But his definition doesn't mention God. It's by the very fact that you're a human being, you have it. So it's not, okay, we know it's from God, but it's not a religious term or anything. It's something that every human being has.
Yes, but as you can guess,
yeah.
You know, he's defining it in a philosophical way. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't want to use the word secular way there, because couched in the language of it is the very language of faith and religion per se. You know, in terms of, but we know that underpinning that definition is the definition of dignity of God, and we're made in the image likeness of God, and therefore we reflect that dignity, you know, mm-hmm. itself. And so whether people believe in God or don't believe in God or not, they are a child of God, you know.
Yeah.
And they have the dignity that is intrinsic to their very self. Yeah. Because they're made in the image and likeness of God. However, why I shared that particular definition with you, because I wanted also to show that if you sit there and say, "Oh, there is no God, and therefore there is no dignity," well, no, we can actually bring you to that point. You know, there's a thing called Axiology, which is a way of philosophizing that looks at the whole concept of value. You know. Yeah. And basically, that's where Solmese is coming from to try and understand that you have intrinsic dignity by being the kind of thing that you are. You know, so right. A human being has the intrinsic dignity of a human being because they are that kind of thing. You know. Yes. You know, a monkey has the monkey dignity, you know, and all these different things. A cat has a cat dignity, but we human beings are different because our dignity is a different type of dignity.
Yes.
because of the gift of reason, itself.
So if someone feels like they don't have dignity, or they feel undignified, or kind of whatever, we know they still have it, no matter how they feel.
Exactly, and that's where the attributed dignity comes into play. You say that the definition of dignity has many voices, say many layers in it, and if you're going to look at it, you have to look at least two of those layers, as in the intrinsic one that's there, is there and cannot be removed from you, but there's this attributed dignity, which is the dignity that can be lost. That we can have a sense of loss within it. When somebody says, "I've lost my dignity," or we're not treating that person with dignity, that's the dignity that we're actually referring to. And there's a classic sort of example between, if you use the term moral dignity, for example, though because of our humanity we all have dignity, there is a difference between moral dignity. One person can have more moral dignity than another person. If you look at the classic example, Hitler, Mother Teresa.
Yes,
both human beings, both have intrinsic dignity, but I suggest profoundly that one lacked in moral dignity, and the other was rich in moral dignity.
Yes, but they both had intrinsic dignity. Yes, I see.
Exactly. Well, but if you don't mind, Kevin, one of the problems with the intrinsic dignity side is that you can fall into the trap of, well, they always have dignity, and therefore I have no responsibility. I have no duties towards this person. I don't have to uphold their dignity because they have intrinsic dignity. And this falsehood comes into play then, and it can be dangerous, and that can happen in healthcare, or the end of life care, or how we treat each other. If you actually take the definition of dignity to be one separate thing as an intrinsic, which is there because of God and made in image likeness God and everything else, but there is a responsibility for us to acknowledge, uphold dignity. St. Thomas talks beautifully. He doesn't write specifically on dignity, but he makes something like I think it's like 1450, maybe 55 references to dignity itself, and then he had another 25 onto that when he puts the dignity of Christ beside each other. But he talks about dignity being dynamic, and it's open-ended as well. It's not just a rigid, tight understanding what dignity means, because every human being is different. Every human being is unique before God. They're unrepeatable, and therefore the understanding of their dignity, is rich and open-ended as well. And so for us who believe that dynamic dignity is enriched by the virtues, faith, and hope and love, it is diminished by sin.
Yes. Okay.
So if we fall into profound sin, yes, we can lose our dignity, not the intrinsic, but lose the dignity which has been attributed to us. And of course, how we get around that is the sacrament of reconciliation. Where we come back into full communion with God again, in terms of our journey with Him. But there's certainly that link between the intrinsic and the attributed, that both have to be remembered together. And now, as you said yourself, it's because of who God is and who we are before God that dignity actually makes sense. But going back to that more secular understanding based upon that eternal truth, one of the reasons why is because you are unique, and you are unrepeatable, And there's a guy called John Crosby that talks about the incommunicability of the human person. We have a communicable part of us, the common part of our humanity. But he would go as far as say the dignity is to be found in that which is unique and unrepeatable to that person. Now Thomas and others would draw us back slightly from that, almost whispering into our ear, remember the intrinsic.
Yeah.
Always remember the intrinsic, but the other side is present as well. You, I, every single human being is a unique, unrepeatable, never to be repeated human being. And the profundity of that.
I see. So when we obviously as Catholics have a duty then to see that to see that dignity in everyone, right? Yes. But it's not necessarily the kind of attributed dignity that we're kind of we're projecting on someone or something. We're searching for their intrinsic dignity. Is that right? We're recognizing their intrinsic dignity. Would that be right, or is it a bit of both?
It is both. It is both. Okay. Because we are recognizing their intrinsic dignity when we're doing it. Okay. Attributed dignity doesn't sit by itself.
Okay.
It's not something we they can say, oh, you have dignity because it's been attributed to you. Attributed sits upon the foundation that is your intrinsic dignity.
Yes.
I have it here somewhere. Attributed dignity is that worth, stature, or value that human beings confer upon others by acts of attribution. Okay. Attributed dignity is therefore a created value. Right. For example, you could have a watch that was given to you by a loved grandfather.
Yeah.
Now, it could be cheap as chips. Yeah. If you go to buy it, it wouldn't be that expensive. But to you, that watch has an intrinsic, an instrumental dignity, as in you've added a dignity to that watch because it's a much loved piece of memory.
Yeah.
And so that there's a created value that has happened there.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at every single human being, as we've seen unfortunately recently in all the trouble in America and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now there's other things going on there, of course, but when the human person is not being uplifted, is not being held in honor because of who they are, then something goes wrong. It goes very awry, And if you look at the history of the development of dignity, a lot of people think it's post World War II with the Universal Declaration, because right back to the time of the Greek philosophers, from Cicero forward, and indeed at that time it was linked to rank, and your status in society and all that goes along with that. And today there's still a part of that, that the dignity is linked to those things. But as time went on, the understanding of dignity moved forward, and even in the church, in terms of how the church understood the human person, how the church understood what the link between the human person and this term we use as dignity itself. And I know that there are those today who are trying to get rid of the term. They say, oh, it's useless. It's fungible. It's not easily defined and all the rest of it. So let's get rid of it. In fact, let's replace it with respect and autonomy, for example. Right. And you're going, no, those two words don't mean dignity. Yeah. Those two words flow out of dignity.
Yeah.
I respect you as a human being, unrepeatable, unique, and all the rest of it, because in the very core of who you are is dignity.
Yes.
Your dignity and your rational nature are linked together. Now, we have to be careful of that language in the sense of if you lose the ability to reason all the rest of it, do you lose your dignity? No. It's the fact that you are an individual substance of a rational nature, as Aquinas would say, and the Boethius and all the rest of it. No, it's your nature is to be rational there, and the dignity part is linked into that very fact.
Yeah.
And therefore we're called to see this dignity. And now, I remember during the research, I think it was a nurse who made the comment, it may be hard to define what dignity is, but you know straight away when it's not present.
Okay.
Yeah. When you go into a hospital room and you're asked to lie in the bed with a gown that's open to the world and all the rest of it, and nobody pulls the curtains, you know straight away that your dignity hasn't been upheld.
Yeah.
When you're, when the color of your skin tells people whether you can sit in one part of a bus or not, or you get a job or not, you know straight away your dignity's not been upheld. You might be able to define it exactly what that is, but you definitely know when it's missing.
Yes, and I suppose that's the treat others as you'd like them to treat you. It is that everyone desires to be treated with dignity.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So
of course it is.
As Catholics, then I'm just kind of searching for kind of the, when we look at, say, Acts of the Apostles, and we see that the first Christians that there were a lot of Gentiles saw how they were treating each other. Yes. And were won over simply by how they were treating each other. And then I'm just thinking of Bishop Robert Barron over the last couple of weeks has had to respond to Catholics, that are, very quite vicious in some of the things they're saying to him. And, I think he even said in a video there recently that when he started out first, he used to get a lot of comments from atheists, a lot of kind of not hate comments, but challenging comments from atheists and things. And he said that, angry comments and things. And he said that now there's more Catholics doing it, and he would take the atheist any day. And I'm just thinking that, from that point of view, the way a lot of the time Catholics behave and how we treat each other, it's not really kind of replicating Acts of the Apostles, and a Gentile looking in from the outside isn't exactly going to go, I want a piece of that.
Yes.
But is dignity one of the keys there, that we're possibly not treating others with dignity? And I suppose maybe through social media and things like that, we hide behind a screen and it's very easy to type on a phone or on a screen and maybe just not think of the dignity of the person and just throw insults.
Yes, but yes is the answer to that. But it's couched in the reality that we're living under a different contagion. It's not just COVID-19, and the virus attached to that. It's relativism.
Okay.
At the moment, it's a sense of the loss of truth, and this postmodern time, postmodernism was once described as the incredulity of the meta-narrative, which is great for an essay, but what does it mean? It means not believing that there's a bigger picture, not believing in a bigger picture, Now, the irony of that, of course, is the more you believe that, you actually are producing your own bigger picture, This reality, this ideology, is my truth. You've heard the arguments before. And people say there is no truth, apart from that one. Apart from that truth, you mean, and so when we're dealing with these sort of things, we have to come to not just, again, that spider's web approach. Yes, of course, if we treated each other with dignity, understanding what dignity actually is, because that's part of the problem, because I want my way, and therefore you treat me with dignity is not dignity, autonomy isn't sovereign. I cannot impose my wish and my will upon another person simply because I want it to happen. You can say to me no, and you still will be upholding my dignity.
Yeah.
You know? Because the actual interesting thing about dignity per se is the connection of the end of our days, the telos, the end point of the human life, to be with God forever. That's actually a core part of how we understand what dignity actually is and where it actually comes from. We are children of God. Our end is to be with God.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, and if I'm looking at you and I'm trying to recognize in you a child of God, whether you believe or not, I still have to recognize that within you. Then what a change it would actually be. But here's the reality: we live in sin. We fall short of the glory of God. And so, as I said earlier, if dignity is a dynamic thing, that should be growing forward and becoming enriched and becoming stronger, but it's sin that cuts across it and diminishes it and diminishes and diminishes, then we get to a point where we don't recognize the dignity of the human being, and we put them into a box that says, you're not human.
Yeah.
Look in the referendum.
Yeah.
They used the word dignity and abortion in the same posters.
Yeah.
The actual word itself was destroyed.
Yes.
And we're reclaiming what dignity actually means. The growing embryo and fetus, again, these terms, these words, fetus, young human being, let's name it for what it is. It's a human being, that's at a much younger stage of their development than I am at 47, but yet we name them not human.
Yeah.
Not a person. Now you will get those who are saying, well, how dare you? It is a human being. And you're going, okay, if it is a human being, then by that very fact alone, it has dignity. He or she. It's not an it. Nor is it a carrot or a goldfish or a dog. It's a human being made in the image and likeness of God. And so when we're approaching that, we have to keep that in mind, but also the reality of our fallenness. The church is, you've heard it quoted many times, is the field hospital for sinners. It's because we recognize the need of a savior. That we are in the church of Jesus Christ, the Savior, the Messiah. It's, if you're asking what it is to be in the image and likeness of God, well, ultimately that is to be Christ-like. And so to see as Christ sees, to hear as Christ hears, to speak as Christ speaks. That classic song, Christ has no body now but mine, but yours. Christ has no hands now but yours. And it's recognizing that. Do we get it right? Not always, And the inhumanity of humanity is quite staggering.
Yeah. And then with that, because when you mentioned relativism there, and then you mentioned like the people that are looking for the dignity, they're looking for the dignity of choice, having choice and things like that. So then can there be maybe a danger of, us feeling like that, oh, well, to recognize the dignity of someone else, we can't tell them that they're doing something wrong, that we might come across as judgmental. And I remember seeing a little thing on I think it was on Facebook, and it just said that to call a sin is not being judgmental. It's like calling a car a car.
Yes.
It's
Exactly.
but we still recognize the dignity of the person behind the sin. And
But that's where the triplet side also comes in. The scriptures tell us to be able to explain the hope that you have with gentleness and respect.
Yeah.
Be able to explain the hope that you have with dignity.
Yeah.
How I treat you, who may be listed as my enemy. What does Christ tell us to do? Love your enemy.
Yes.
He doesn't say become bosom pals with. He doesn't become big mates with. He says to love. And Thomas Aquinas tells us to love is to seek the good for the other's sake.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you can almost, and this is in inverted commas, of course, to love is to seek the dignity of the other for the other's sake. You know, because what we're saying there is I want the good for you to happen. What is that good? To be with God for all eternity. You know, but so if I'm upholding your dignity, I'm upholding the very fact that there is a profound plan for you. You know, and when I don't do that, then I'm actually undermining my own humanity as well. And I undermine my own dignity, not intrinsic, but my own attributed dignity. You know, as I said, it's not moving forward and strengthening; it's becoming diminished. You know, and we have to be careful how we go about that. You know, Edward Shree, Dr. Edward Shree, writes beautifully about this. You know, in terms of judgment. You know, this thing of who are you to judge me? You know, don't judge unless they be judge thyself. You know, you're going, yes, but what does that all that mean? You know, and he has I think it's a 7-part approach to that. You know, where you actually enter into the conversation with the person. You know, that now he doesn't mention the word dignity per se there. He's more talking about judgment and relativism. You know, but the very first one I think of his list applies across the board. If you are going to dialogue with somebody that is holding a profoundly different and wrong position, you know, because there are wrong positions. I'm afraid. I'm sorry. Not all truth is equal. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. There are intrinsic goods and intrinsic evils. You know, of course, relativism says no, there's not.
Yeah.
But we know there is. You know. There's things that you will teach your son Michael. You know, if he's running out the gate and he's going to run across the road, you are going to call after him and say, "Stop!"
Yeah.
Stop! Don't do that. You know, you're not going to stand at their doorstep and go, "Well, I'm not going to impose on his free choice to run out in front of the car." You know, you will share with him the intrinsic truth that is not a good thing to do. You know, and it's not just by social contract. You know, that's the argumentation you hear lots and lots these days. You know, it's only because we socially have agreed these things are right and these things are wrong, you know. But to go back to Edward Shree, his starting point is, if you're going to enter into that conversation, then you must lead it with mercy.
Okay.
And that's what's missing.
Yeah.
That concept of what mercy actually is, you know, misericordia, that sense of reaching into the misery of the heart of the other.
Yeah.
And lifting it, you know. And so if you're going to dialogue at the level of dignity with and recognizing the dignity of the other person, even though you vehemently disagree with them, you take the role that's going to say, okay, where's the grace in this? Where is the virtue in this, you know? And to start from a place where maybe you're going to listen first, for example. You know, you're going to hear the other person. You're not just going to close them down because they hold different opinions to you. You know, because you have a genuine heart for their dignity to be upheld, because you know that God has a particular plan for them. You know, you want them to be in heaven. You know, you want them to be with God for all eternity. As Christians, you know, and therefore, when you're approaching this person, you know, how can I help this person to get back to God? You know, how can I help this person to discover the beauty of truth? How do you get them to discover the beauty of beauty? you know, itself. You know, and the starting point there is mercy. You know, tut tut tut, a finger wagging is not going to bring anybody back on board with you, you know, in terms of that's a discussion. However, with that in mind, there are times in which we have to say, I'm sorry, but that is wrong. You know, with the proviso of the mercy side, which is this: I'm not actually judging you as your soul. I'm judging the truth, small t truth that you're placing out there. The classic thing, love the sinner, hate the sin. But that applies across all these relationships. But we need to be careful in how we go about that. And hands up, we very often don't get it right. Because unfortunately the passions kick in. We don't control the passions and all that sort, and we're passionate about a particular issue and all that sort, and rightly so at times. If somebody's saying to you, let's bring a law that's going to kill the most innocent in our land, if you're sitting there going, fair enough, there's stuff not quite right there, in terms of us, because if we understand dignity to be every human being, then it's every human being.
So that includes the politician that wants to change the laws, the people campaigning as well who want to change the laws, people who may be standing on another side. It also includes the child in the womb, but it includes every human being. And I suppose the child in the womb, we feel like we're fighting the cause for that child, but sometimes then maybe, okay, we are in opposition to a conflicting worldview, but but we have to recognize the dignity of all of the other people as children of God, that God also desires to have them in heaven as much as he desires to have us in heaven. So so we need to recognize that. And I think that's interesting, because I think that at times, I suppose like that with the passions kind of at times like these can really get the better of us. And but when we start referring to, to individual people as, as them, and, the other side, them, and kind of talking kind of negatively and stuff like that, maybe it's a reminder at times to kind of come back to, they are children of God, and we also need to pray for them, and not in a kind of a judgmental pray for those sinners and change them, but just in a kind of
there's nothing wrong with praying for the sinners.
No, but but you know what I mean. Instead of kind of us being judgmental in a kind of they're so awful and they're all
But Kevin, they may be. Why do we fear that? They may be awful. They may be horrible people. Whoever these people are, out there. But it's same beyond that. That's where the Christian understanding is to see them through the eyes of Christ. They themselves may have made. I may have made choices. That grates against people around me. Even the normal things of life, just in friendships and all the rest of it, you say stuff, you do stuff that just annoys people, but they're still your friends, and go beyond that. But in terms of our enemies, yes, we are to see them as Christ sees them, but also we are to love them as Christ loved them, and that's not a mushy gushy love. That's not going, oh well, that's fine. That's fine. If you want to believe that, that's fine. That is not actually a true love. We're seeking the good for them for their sake. That is yes, recognizing the intrinsic dignity within them, but there's no way is it lifting it. If I recognize in your dignity, I don't want you to be laboring under sin. I don't want you to be laboring under falsehood. Whether it's within the church or outside the church, whether it's individuals, whether it's friends, whether it's family, myself, because of your dignity, because of God's love for you, because of God's plan for you, because of what is possible for you. So when I'm entering in that discussion, and I've had many heated arguments and debates around the end of life and beginning of life and everything else, and you have to you have to stop yourself from time to time and go, wait a minute, wait a minute. You know, how can I be truly pro-life in those terms if I'm willing to destroy the character of that particular person in a particular way? You know.
Yeah.
Whereas the caveat, I think, is this: we need to be careful that we don't do anything then, you know, because still there's a responsibility for us to defend the innocent.
Mm-hmm.
There's a responsibility for us to uphold humanity, you know, and that's where the whole thing around tolerance comes into play these days. It's a word that has been destroyed, you know.
Yeah.
You know, if you say anything against a particular ideology at the moment, you're intolerant. You'll be labelled. You'll be put in a box. You're just the way it is, you know. And it's all around us. It's in our own country and worldwide, you know. Whereas I am intolerant of many things, you know. I am intolerant of sin. I am intolerant of actions against the innocent. I am intolerant against stealing. I am intolerant against abuse. I am intolerant against all these wrongs, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and rightly so, you know. Whereas tolerance isn't simply agreeing with you because you have said it.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually not being tolerant, because the irony is, for me to be tolerant, I have to actually disagree with you first of all, because I don't have to be tolerant if you and I agree that ice cream is nice.
Yeah.
You have to. You have to be tolerant if we go, the Sistine Chapel is beautiful. There's no tolerance. I'm not being tolerant to you.
Yeah.
In that statement, you know. And there's no expectations of tolerance there per se. You know, if you go, I hate X, you know, and I go, but I actually love it actually, you know.
Yeah.
Then tolerance comes into play. You know, how am I tolerant of you holding that counter position to me? You know, and I would be undermining that my own position if my tolerance was simply to say, well, you said it, that's okay, that's fine, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's not tolerance, you know.
Yes.
You know, and our understanding of it, you know. And so that's what you're up against at the moment. There's a great lack of tolerance, you know. Proper understanding of tolerance. There's a great lack of reaching out to the other human being and to see them as human being, seeing them as a child of God, seeing them as unique, incommunicable, unrepeatable. You know, we don't all have huge IQs. We don't all have amazing sporting abilities. We don't all have talents and abilities in the same measure with each other. And the absence or the presence of them does not undermine our humanity or make me less of a dignified or a dignity-rich human being than another. You know, we see that constantly, more and more in healthcare. If you don't have this particular property, you know, you lose the gift of reason. You know, well, you fall asleep and you lose consciousness. You know, you always put consciousness together with this one. You fall asleep and you lose consciousness. By some definitions, Peter Singer and Michael Tooley and these boys, then your personhood goes, and your dignity goes. You know, and you do to that person whatever you wish, going by their definition. You know, whereas we're saying no, it's much more than that. You know,
that's interesting, because I suppose that there are times where, you know, we can absolutely reduce it. I mean, it can come right down to if someone has a managerial role or a supervisory role or something like that, that the people, the subordinates, are lesser kind of, you know, than them. And and this is kind of all around us, that, you know, we've got, you know, rich or poor, or, you know, things like that. We've got a homelessness crisis at the moment. And, you know, that there are times where we might say, that's awful, someone should do something about it. You know, it's kind of, but, you know, I can't, you know, and but again, like that I suppose it's seeing that, you know, no matter if you have a supervisor, managerial role, that that's not the definition of who you are. That doesn't define you, and someone else they are an equal, in the same way that, like that, you know, someone who's homeless is an equal human being. And I think even if we do want to help, or if we do want to help someone like that, sometimes there is also a danger, I think, maybe kind of thinking, I'm up here and I'm helping this person down here, and good on me, and without kind of just saying, no, this is another child of God. It's my brother or sister, and we're equal.
Yeah. Well, when the Lord puts it so simply, to give a glass of cold water to another in the name of Christ, a glass of cold water. And I know sometimes when we have these conversations, it sounds so ideological and, just, kind of going, oh, wouldn't it be a wonderful world if this would happen? Yes, it would. The answer, that's why Christ came, to set us free from the bondage of sin itself, and yes, it would be a better place if we would recognize the dignity of every human being, because then some of the things that we're having to fight against at this moment in time wouldn't have to be fought against, in the sense of if we truly understood the dignity of another human being, we would never push for abortion. Mm-hmm. We would never push for euthanasia, at all. Thinking that somehow killing another human being somehow has more dignity in it than actually caring for them, to have compassion alongside with, to suffer with another person. Of course, these terms are losing their sense. They've been taken out of the lexicon of care itself. What is care? What is autonomy? What is respect? And how does it fit into our understanding of the human person? We saw in the church. Let's be honest, Kevin. We saw in the church what happens when we forgot and did not uphold the dignity of the innocent.
Yeah.
We saw it, and I sit here, a sinner, trying to be a saint, because as I used to joke with my students, you have two options, you're going to hell, you're going to heaven, I'm trying to be a saint. Because they used to say to me, "Oh, a saint, come on, catch a grip."
I know.
a great northern phrase, catch a grip. But they're going, well, I don't like your other option.
The other option is there's only one.
There's only one, and if maybe I could illustrate this with just stories, in terms of, I remember when I was a student in Dublin, and our student lived there, and coming out of a particular mass in the Pro Cathedral, and I had literally nothing in my pockets apart from my beads and my oils, to be honest with you. And 3 times on the way home, I was stopped by people, can you give me some money,
Yeah.
And the first time I was stopped by two young women, right outside the cathedral, and it says, I said, I don't have any money on me, but what I do have is I have the blessing of Jesus Christ, and I can give you that, And he looked at you and went, okay then,
Yeah.
And I remember the first 2 praying with him, all the rest of it, and I remember their eyes just lit up, and it says, one of them turned to the other and goes, he knows. I go, I know what. He says that we've left the church, and I says, I didn't know that, but I'm praying for you anyway. He says, now if you want to come back, there's confessions happening inside right now, I'm already going to hear a confession here and bring you back. But I walked around the corner, and there was a gentleman on the street in really bad condition, begging, really just calling out for help. And, of course, addressing the habit, Padre, I went over to him, I genuinely said, look, I'm sorry, I have nothing in my pockets. nothing to help you in terms of money, but what I do have is the blessing of Jesus Christ, and I will give you that. And I pray that the next person that comes after me will actually be the one to help you, to lift you out of the situation. So we prayed, and I gave him the blessing. That was a Saturday, and the following Tuesday, I met him down the town, selling the big issue, and he ran over to me. He says, you blessed me on Saturday. And I says, yeah, I remember that. He says, after you left, a gentleman came over to me and said, do you want a job?
What?
Do you want a job?
Yeah, wow.
Selling the big issue,
Yeah.
And then 3 times in a row, going back to the prairie. I met a gentleman who used to be a tent city at the end of our street, and he called out, Padre, help me. And I said, how can I help you? €20 would help. And I said, I imagine it would, but unfortunately, I don't have it on me today. But again, what I do have is the blessing of Jesus Christ. And I can give you that. He says, I'm a Christian, Father. And I says, I recognize that. He says, but I give you the blessing of Jesus. And so he did. And he went to turn away. And I called after him and said, by the way, what's your name? And he gave me his name. He was from, I think it was Lithuania, I think he said. And he gave me his name. And then he turned away. And this was before the pandemic, of course. And I said, can I shake your hand? And he was a big guy, a big, strong fella. And I took him by the hand. And he just crumpled. And the tears tripped him. I said, let's call him John. He said, John, what's wrong? You're the first person to call me by my name and to shake my hand since I've come to Dublin, And I'm just sharing these things with you, not to say, how great is Father Columba? No, that was absolutely simple, recognizing, God willing, the humanity and therefore the dignity of each of those 3 or the 4 people altogether, in a different situation, and that is the Christian call.
That's very interesting, because I think even at times, we can reduce someone to maybe their addiction or something, and that's what we kind of see them as, without seeing that dignity, and then again at times that maybe if we do want to go that step further, we're like, well, I don't want to give money to enable an addiction or something, but even at that, I remember at a marriage retreat one time, a priest telling us that the way children spell love is Time, and that's, so he said, if you want to give kids love, he said, give them time. That's all they want. He said, but I think like that it's the same, that I've had a similar experience to that with someone, a homeless person that was struggling with addiction, and he was saying, do you have, he asked for money, and I said, I didn't. I said, look, I've only got my card, I've no cash. And he said, I'm just looking for something to eat. And I said, so I said, look, I'm going to Supermax. Do you want something? And he was like, oh yeah, anything. And then he was kind of looking at me as if like, he won't be back. But when I came back with something for him, he was just a totally different person, opened up, told me his name, and we had a little bit of a chat, and I didn't see him again. But again, like that, it was just that. Funnily enough, I was after coming out of St. Mary's in Pope's Quay in Cork when it happened, and so we had just been having the Alpha thing. So I came out, and it was funny because there had been a testimony on, and someone had a story about it, and I came out, and this guy was there, and I was like, what a hypocrite I would be if I just, if I do nothing, But, and of course, there have been, that's one example. There have been many times I've done nothing. But again, like that, it's that, sometimes we might want to give money, but we can give time or like that offer to prayer, just to talk to someone, recognizes the dignity of them, asking their name, shaking hands when we're allowed to shake hands.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's when you give these examples as examples that you're reminding yourself, this is what this is supposed to be like. It may not be appropriate to give a person on the street money, so you give the money to the charities. It's actually looking after. I remember, was it maybe not mention a particular charity's name, but there was a charity that had a huge billboard around Belfast that said, please don't give it to the person, give it to us. And we're going out and we're feeding and clothing and housing and that person, and so the dignified response to that isn't necessarily here's your tenner and I feel great about myself, It's actually, you're right. It's to say, is to pray for that person. And unfortunately, these days, that can be quite difficult. I mean, we can't be naive with this other. There may be times when you do have to separate yourself from another person, because it is a dangerous situation. It's a situation that is not appropriate for you to enter into, But at the same time, you're not denying that the person there is in need. You're not denying they're a human being who has the full dignity. But what happens is, as in life, yourself and myself and friends and family and everything else, you will meet lots of people who say they don't feel that their dignity has been upheld. That I've been a hospital chaplain. I have been at very difficult, let's say biologically difficult deaths, in terms of medically difficult deaths, in terms of it just was incredible, the breakdown of the body that happened, and the actual horribleness of that, and without being too crude about it, but I remember one particular case, the condition caused the excrement to come up and out of their mouth, rather than down and out. Very distressing for the person, very distressing for their family. But I remember, as a chaplain, realizing that if you just look into their eyes, and you saw them looking back, and I would love to say, well, I worked that out for myself. I didn't. When I was a student priest working in Belfast in the Royal Victoria Hospital as a assistant chaplain to the chaplain, really, and part of my duty was to go onto the burns ward, and I was 19 years old. I've never seen burns like that before, and especially full depth facial burns, and it took me a while to know what to do, because he kept going in and he kept just seeing the burns, and there was one of the matrons, as they were then, took me to one side and says, if you can, son, look into their eyes. If you cannot look into their eyes, make sure that they can hear your voice, make sure that they know that you are present to them. Now, there's other ways of doing that, of course, but how do you actually make yourself present to that person, who may be going through the most terrible situation, most horrible medical time, but yet that's not the contact point between the two selves. It is one human being reaching out to another, one unique I, the letter I, one unique I reaching out to another unique I, And when that happens, that is called love, And that is basically the answer to your question all those minutes ago that you asked. How do we go about this? And I shared Thomas Aquinas' definition of love, but that's what it is. When a unique I interacts in that manner with another unique I do so out of love, seeking the good for that person for their sake. as a human being, as with my gifts and talents at one level, with my foibles at another. As a hospital chaplain, you go into a room, the stench and the smell and everything else that went with it. That was not dignified. There was no dignity in that moment, in terms of leaving the intrinsic to one side. That was not the way to be upholding their dignity at that time. But yet that was the reality. So how then do we lift the dignity of that person? You saw beyond the physicality of what was happening, and you recognized the person who was there. And I remember working with students, medical students, about this, and they say, but what if the person is crying out for you to kill them?
Yeah.
Take my life, And I used to say to the students, I said, pause, everybody just pause. Because I want you to acknowledge the frustration of that. Because to take their life isn't the answer. The awkwardness of that moment for you personally is not solved by answering yes to that. There's a guy called Harvey Chokanoff. Him and his team have done a lot of work in dignity as a therapy, actually, especially at the end of life. And I don't want to wrongly share what his research is, but just paraphrasing, he basically discovered after much research that in the conversation the person may say, I'd rather die than.
Yeah.
And then he has a list of you looking after my personal care. I'd rather die than being a burden to society. I'd rather die than, But he discovered that if you deal with the post than,
okay,
the first part of the sentence drops away.
So it's fear.
Fear is part of it. He has a how do you put it, a therapy form, to look at the social, the physical, the human issues. Some people are fearful of what's going to happen next. Is there an afterlife, for example? They're fearful also, well, what's going to happen to my house?
Yeah.
Fearful of what's going to happen to my children? What's going to happen to there's that level of fear. But there's also this sense of, well, I'm just a burden. But
again, that's probably a fear of being a burden.
Yes, but that fear of being a burden comes out and is placed before them from a very wrong place. Why should any human being think it's better for them to have their life shortened? Out of a fear of being a burden to somebody else. Where have they got that notion from? And that was one of the issues that we were looking in the early days of the COVID and all the rest of it, in terms of in countries around the world, who gets respirators, who doesn't. People coming off, people were being taken off, and others, and this is incredible moral issues, ethical issues going on at the time, and of course. I thank God here, in terms of there was enough respirators for everybody who was sick and all the rest of it, But that's not really the point, And there's another day's discussion about the medical system and healthcare system per se, and the monies and the costs and everything that goes along with it, But in terms of the dignity of the person.
Yeah. But as you mentioned COVID there, actually, I'm just thinking that, as we recognize dignity, we're not just recognizing dignity of Catholics. We're not just recognizing dignity of Irish people or of Europeans. It's of everybody, past, present, future. And with COVID, like, sometimes we can kind of see that, like, oh, well, the death toll in Ireland is, it's like, I don't know what it is today, actually, but, but say if it was if it was one or two people, kind of go, oh yeah, great. And we kind of, move on, or else it's like, well, the problem has moved off to America or to Mexico or Brazil or, whatever. And we can become a bit desensitized. Now, I know we don't know every single individual, so it's we're more likely to be a little desensitized. But is there a danger at times where we just reduce people to numbers and things like that we don't actually think of the souls themselves and the families of those around them that are suffering, and even the numbers of people? Sometimes we've kind of said, well, it's only the old people that are dying, or it's only people with pre-existing medical conditions and stuff. Are we maybe not looking at the dignity of everyone who's getting sick and just the whole dignity of the whole situation?
I think so. I think that's why it was so important in the early days that, let's name it, the RTE actually in the evening time read out the names.
Yeah.
That it wasn't. And there's questions around that, of course, in terms of how you do that,
Yeah.
But it wasn't just 23 people died today,
Yeah.
John died today, Mary died today, Oisin died today, David died today. It's these are people, these are real people who are in relationship with other human beings, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, they are our brothers and sisters. And you're right. And I think at one level there's almost I don't want to use a natural response to illness being somewhere else, because there's certain sense in which we want it to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't want to get sick. I don't want my loved ones getting sick. I don't want those around me getting sick. So if it was over there, though, that's great. As long as it's not near me. But in your question, you're right, because what that then does is that it puts this barrier, and this distancing. There's John Paul II talks about this problem of alienation, and humanity alienating itself from each other.
Right.
Whereas that is not what love is. That's not what mercy is. That's not what seeking the good for the other is. If it leads to alienation, then we're doing something wrong there, And I know people listen to this and go, "Oh, they said that word wrong again," judgmental. Going, well, it is wrong,
Yeah.
because we aren't upholding what it is to be a human being,
Yeah.
and we can fall into traps. One of the most dangerous things that we face in terms of our response is to be cynical. Cynicism kills the very soul. It robs us of our hope.
Yeah.
And what I mean by cynical is going, sure, it's fine. It's it's them again. It's those ones. It's that country. It's another country. It's the young ones. It's the old ones. It's those under 45. It's those. It's them. And when we lose the sense of hope, then there's something that dies within us,
Yeah.
And hope is trusting in that which has been revealed to be true is true. That's where faith comes along,
Yeah.
But hope draws us forward to the end goal, to telos, which can be difficult. It can be hard at times. Life is not easy, But the caveat, we do so leaning on the very one whom we are moving towards,
Yeah.
So for us, God, we're moving towards God. We're reaching towards God, and it is difficult at times. And sometimes we put the hands up and go, I don't know what's going on here. But hope is when we lean ourselves on the one to whom we're actually moving towards. And if somebody comes along and removes that from us, it's devastating.
Yeah.
Absolutely devastating. That's why in the hospital setting and all the rest of it, and the truth sets us free, but how we share that truth with a person at a particular time, it's not that you give false hope, because that's even more damaging, but at the same time, you don't undermine the person's sense of hope.
Yeah.
A person can be given the most terrible news. You have days to live. You may even have hours to live. But that same person can still have the hope of knowing that that what's going to happen next is with God. They're filled with the hope that is held in place by the love of those people who are around them. So they can be, as a hospital chaplain, I came across many people that if I was looking in and going, where are you getting that from? I'd be so angry and so cross and so questions and everything else. But the hope-filled nature of their response, and it wasn't naive. It wasn't to say false hope. It was going, oh, you never know, it might get better tomorrow. No, their hope was actually beyond that horizon.
Yeah.
To a horizon that was so much further away, and ironically, because of the news they were given, made it even closer. Because of death, for example.
And we can be tempted to lie to people in situations like that. We can or to withhold information from a loved one. If it's an elderly loved one, the family get the news that that the news is bad. There can be a temptation to lie to them. Tell them, no, it'll be okay, or that it's like, we won't tell that old person that they have cancer. That a family member. We won't tell them this, or we won't, and just keep telling them that it's okay. And we're giving them a false hope, I guess. Whereas in reality, if we just have respect, tell them the truth, then we can then, help to prepare them for that, to give them that true hope, that lasting hope.
Yes, but as you can guess, there are nuances to how you do that.
Yeah.
Professionally and even pastorally.
Yeah.
To deliberately lie in a situation almost inevitably ends up in a more difficult position, But the brutality of truth at times isn't going to help either.
Yeah.
It's that, how do I share the hope that I have with gentleness and respect? If somebody's in their last dying breaths or whatever, and you haven't told them, oh, by the way, on top of this, you've also got this. That you want to use the definition of lie and truth. That's a lie. You didn't.
I kind of mean more, where we kind of, if someone is dying, it's nearly like tell them that they're not. That kind of way. It's like that it'll be okay. That kind of thing.
It's funny in a hospital situation, whether you're a chaplain or a healthcare professional, we all have the stories of the family member in the bed saying, "Don't tell them."
Yeah.
Because they don't know. Yeah. And then you go out the door and the family members are saying, don't tell them. To the sick person who's just told you not to tell them.
Oh yeah.
And that's where you're gently pastorally, wanting to be the conduit of truth then.
Yeah.
To be the one. Well, maybe it'd be good for you to actually speak with your loved one. You're actually stronger than you think. Or there's maybe an opportunity for you to have that talk that you've put off, and to say the things that you really need to say at this time, because they're, even in the process of the healthcare of the dying person, there are many truths that they have to face at that time, but what is the actual truth that they actually need to be hearing at that moment, Well, because as I say, there's lots of things that they need to be told and they should be told and everything else, and I agree with that 100%. But when you walk in a situation and there's a truth that needs to be heard, that needs to be shared, that needs to, that takes precedence as such, you know, and it's not easy, because there will be those who will say, I don't want to know, you know, and that's where the I suppose the choice of truth comes into play as well. The truth remains true anyway, you know.
Yeah.
That truth is a truth, you know, but I may choose not to know it, you know, and that's a different thing. You know, so it's about how we approach the person, how we approach the family, for example, and we're talking about end of life care, for example, because the dignity of the dying person is not just the person who's dying. It is the family and the friends. It is the healthcare professionals. It is actually the environs in which they find themselves within. You know, all these things linked by this common sense of the dignity of that person. You know, and part of that dignity for them is, you know, I have something to share with you about your medical care at this time. I choose not to know. You know,